Stranded in space a million miles from Earth and hurtling towards the sun, survival seems impossible.
Carl Stradley's first independent feature all takes place in a single location, a damaged escape pod, as a lone astronaut does his best to survive his fate when all seems lost. Today we'll recap and review the events of this sci-fi adventure film, Solace.
The sound of a radio crackles and we hear fuzzy communications that grow in stress and tension before shouting cuts them short. Deep in space, a small pod soars through the vacuum, followed by a massive wave of debris flying at high speed. Inside the pod, alarms sound and astronaut Troy wakes up alone and groggy. He looks to his right. His fellow astronaut is dead in their seat.
Stephen Ogg plays Holloway, and it's his job to carry this one-man film by himself, with a little help from the voice of the brilliant British actress Alice Lowe.
Troy radios a mayday signal, but there is no response. He removes his cap and we see he's sustained a bloody injury to the back of his head. Continuing his radio report, he assesses that his pod is flying totally blind. Suddenly, he receives a response. The voice belongs to Roberts. She's the commander of a ship called the Hathor 18. He reports his co-pilot, Milan, is dead. The force of the opening explosion killed him as they made their way to the escape pod where both of them are now trapped. He reports his other fellow astronaut, Harris, has also died. She demands coordinates from Troy, but his damaged craft is giving no readings. He asks if he could see her ship, but from his position, he could see nothing but the emptiness of space. We see in the outside of Troy's pod heading unstoppably towards the sun. Robert asks Troy for his medical status, but he's unable to comply because his ship system is down. He demands to speak to the commander again, but Roberts refuses, repeating that she is the commander and Troy must speak with her, and her alone. She asks him a series of questions, like what his company and job are. We learn he is a prospector working for a company named Orbis. He is an engineer and his job involves mining asteroids for valuable materials. He asks if he can speak to Control, but Roberts reports that the same explosion that destroyed his ship has also damaged their communications array, and that's why the commander isn't available to him. She tells him they've triangulated his position and confirms that he is indeed heading straight for the sun. More bad news, she says the ship cannot be steered and that the temperature control is dropping fast and he will soon die from hypothermia. He can switch off the coolant chamber to buy himself some time. However, due to the speed that his craft is traveling, he only has 70 minutes before his craft completely burns up. It gets better too. His radiation tank also has a leak. She reports that they're coming to save him, but he resists. His pod has no airlock and transport system, and he's certain he will die. Roberts is more optimistic. She reports that he'll simply have to time his jump from his pod to their ship. She insists that if there's any possibility that they can save his life, they are going to. The temperature has started to drop in his pod and Troy is breathing heavily and shivering. The cold is becoming difficult for him to handle. A beeping sound startles him. His stat band is reporting that he's starting to suffer from hypothermia. He has to turn the coolant off now. However, once he does, the ship will start to rapidly heat up. Roberts advises him that he needs to put on the evac suit. This way he can survive the rising temperature for 30 minutes. Then the evac suit will buy him another 30 minutes before the heat kills him. This should buy him enough time to survive until they are able to save him. Suddenly, the glass screen on his pod begins to crack. The temperature outside and within the pod is too much for the glass and it's starting to break. If he's going to turn the coolant off, it's now or never. He makes his way into the coolant chamber, which Roberts advises him will be colder than Antarctica, so he's going to need to be quick. He glides to the back of the ship and in the frozen temperatures of the coolant chamber. Reaching the back, he's able to pull the off switch for the coolant, but the handle is so frozen that as he reaches the handle, it tears the frozen flesh from his hand.
Back in the cockpit, he makes contact with Roberts again. He realizes that a piece of debris has pierced through the ship and stabbed into his ribcage.
He needs to perform DIY surgery now. As the ship warms up, his sensation will come back, and the pain will become too much for him to handle. He bandages his bloody hand up, and with a grisly yell, he pulls the shrapnel from his ribcage. He finds some prototype electromagnets in Milton's clothing, as well as a photo of his family, but nothing he can use to seal a wound. After a little more rummaging, he finds a pocket-sized blowtorch. He braces himself as he heats up the shrapnel, using it to seal the wound and stop the bleeding. The pain causes Troy to pass out, and he wakes up later, groggy from the pain. He continues to demand to speak to Commander Tsurusawa, but Roberts finally admits that Tsurusawa is dead. She says she kept it quiet because she knew they were close and she needed him stable. Another debris field hits the ship, spinning Troy's pod out of control. He loses hope and begins to make his way to the ship's hatch. If he opens it and kills himself, Roberts will abort her mission and save him, and perhaps he can save her. Robert pleads with him not to so she could save him. At the last moment, he lets go of the hatch handle and passes out. He wakes to Robert's voice. He asks for a status report. She reports that his pod will burn up in 40 minutes and that he should be able to handle it for at least another 10 minutes with 30 minutes of oxygen in his evac suit. She says she should be with him in 35 minutes, narrowly giving them just enough time to save him. He says he needs to talk to a woman he needs to send a message to. The two of them begin to connect and exchange information about themselves. Roberts talks about how she got into the business, and Troy jokes that he's considering early retirement. He says that whoever this woman is back home, he just needs to tell her that he's sorry. He mentions that he has a son, but this moment of peace is interrupted as a stray piece of shrapnel crashes through the hull of his pod, and he rapidly begins to lose pressure. In a race against time, Troy is able to don the evac suit. He establishes communication with Roberts, who advises him that his cabin is now completely depressurized. With no pressure, there's no way to blast him out of the ship, unless he performs a spacewalk to fix the carbon dioxide supply, which would also kill him. He insists that Roberts needs to turn back, but she is insistent that she follows the final orders given by her commander.
Here we see extended shots of the sun for a few moments. It seems as though these are dropped in throughout the film to pad out its running time, as the writers sometimes run low on ideas for situations to put Troy in.
As his pod hurtles for the sun, Troy uses the prototype magnets he found earlier to stay attached to the pod and perform his spacewalk, giving him time to fix the carbon dioxide supply. Robert tells him the outside temperature under the direct glare of the sun is 700 degrees. He'll be killed immediately. He responds he'll simply complete the repairs as the pod revolves away from the sun's light. Roberts counts down from 10 as Troy prepares himself and opens the hatch. In the eerie calm of space, he begins his repairs. He complains that he is suffering from migraine symptoms and is not feeling great. Roberts reminds him that he needs to slow his breathing and that he only has a few minutes before he's exposed to the sun. He undergoes the repairs against the clock, which he has only 4 minutes to spare. Troy's oxygen supply drops to critical levels as his time limit drops to less than 60 seconds. The blazing light of the sun is creeping over the ship and getting dangerously close. He asks if he's stabilized the problem, but he can't get through to Roberts. She finally responds that he's managed to fix the problem, and he races back inside the pod. Back inside the pod, a dazed Troy attempts to attach his oxygen nozzle to the ship. Drifting in and out of consciousness, he makes the connection, but the ship tells him no connection has been detected. As he loses consciousness, the ship makes a connection and his oxygen supply is restored. Troy attempts to contact Roberts once more. The sun is getting closer with every second. The light and the heat are nearly unbearable, but Roberts tells him to hang on. She reports that they finally made contact with control and that she can see him. Her ship is gaining on him. It's a long ship with a large reflective umbrella at the front to fend off the sun's rays. He pleads for her to make the call back home and let him speak to his wife. As he approaches the sun, the heat and light drain his life and he gets weaker and weaker, losing his consciousness. But as the Hather approaches, he gets his second wind and tells her to get in front. He's going to make the jump from his pod. As Robert pulls up beside him, her hatch opens. Troy's oxygen reaches 0 and he begins to lose consciousness. Robert's radios, they've been able to make contact with Earth and his wife. His wife crackles over the radio. She says his name, but he's unable to speak. His oxygen levels depleted, he barely has any life left, but somehow he has the energy to get out of his chair. He looks like he's about to make it. He says he's going home as the shattered window finally smashes inward and the movie cuts to black.
In this climax, we're left with a slightly open ending, though given that Troy finally got to apologize to his wife and the dire situation he was in, it was pretty easy to presume that he died before he was saved. The concept of being trapped in one location for a film isn't new, but due to the cheap costs, they're a great choice for low-budget films. The low budget is evident in Solace as it doesn't have many thrilling moments to keep us interested. It sometimes has a rapid pace, then slows down for 15 to 20 minutes at a time for the two characters to talk to us. It doesn't generate much tension, but it's a solid effort at a challenging concept for the first-time director Carl Strathy. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload. Also, don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.